Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cross Commission podcast. My name is Saif Akadu. On the other line with me, Jake Nazar. Jake, how you doing, kid?
I am doing well. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, me too, man. Because as you can see, we have a special guest with us, and obviously friend of the show, and yeah, just a great guy in general. Mark Hart. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure having you on, and tis the season to be jolly with bracketology season. So really happy to have you aboard.
Absolutely, safe. We're finally April. We finally can talk about it. No more beating around the bush. I know you guys have had a few definitely not bracketology shows, but this one is explicitly a bracketology show. So
it's like the what's it say? The soft opening, grand opening bit.
No, yeah.
It's like, what about that like 2 weeks ago when you guys talked about the RPI? No, that was just the soft opening.
This is when just friends and family they try it. It's just this is actually the grand opening. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, people have listened to us for last few years. Seen, heard at least worked with us, talk about the last month of the season before the selection Sunday, and this season it's going to be each one has like a little bit of interesting tidbits to it. But Mark, always a pleasure to have you on, and obviously maybe just wanted to like give you a little bit of runway just to start the show, and I think we got some good show notes to start about the selection criteria that we wanted to stress beforehand.
Yeah, so for anyone who's new, like previous listeners, they're probably used to this stuff, and this is just going to be review for them. But for people who haven't been here, these are the actual selection criteria that the NCAA selection committee looks at when picking the field. All right, first of all, they look at strength of schedule index, which we'll talk about. They look at the results of the RPI, and I think there is some debate as to what is actually meant by, quote, results of the RPI. But we take that to mean, and I think most people take that to mean, where the team is actually ranked in the final RPI standings, meaning the team in question. Then you're talking about wins and losses versus the RPI brackets that we talk about a bunch on the show. So top 5, top 10, top 20. You'll hear us talk about top 5 wins, top 10 wins, top 20 wins all night long. Next up, you have average RPI win, average RPI loss. So that's taking all of the team's wins, all of their losses, and averaging to find the average of those wins and losses in terms of the RPI. Next up, head-to-head results, then results versus common opponents, significant wins and losses. So those are wins against teams ranked higher than the team in question in RPI or ranked lower than the RPI. Finally, locations of contest. Now, the reason I wanted to go through this was not necessarily to say what the selection criteria are, but to say what they aren't. And there are 3 things I want to highlight that are definitely not listed in the selection criteria. That is, 1, the timing of games. Games that are played in February count the same for selection as games that are played the first week of May. Second of all, margin of victory. Winning a game by 1 goal is the same as winning a game by 15 goals. And finally, with an asterisk, eye test. I say with an asterisk because the final selection criteria is input from the regional advisory committees. So the eye test is not directly a selection criteria, but the committee can get input from these regional advisory committees if they feel the need to. And with that laid out as the groundwork for our conversation, I hand it back over to you guys.
No, it's always really important because you always see people making some questions about like picks and stuff, but like focusing on things that are not even on the selection committee's like radar, let alone like actually on the criteria, which is really important. I mean, I think it maybe not as I always remember 2022. That was like probably the just a great year in terms of the bubble and like how everything played out. But it feels like things have started to settle down a little bit. Like still have like a few teams that harbor like most of the really premium top 5 wins. But I don't know, but maybe you guys disagree. I didn't feel like the bubble was like as unsettled as previous years, but there's still much to play. But it kind of felt like a little bit more clear than years past. It's one of your guys' overall take on that.
So I would say that the bubble feels clear if you really get into the data. I think that what's creating a lot of unhappiness among lacrosse fans right now is that they feel that the RPI isn't really reflective of the season so far. But I think that once you get past the raw numbers of the RPI and really look at profiles, that some of those teams that are outliers actually evaluate better than the RPI suggests at a glance.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's less clear than. I mean, we have to wait and see because things can change as we've seen the last couple of years, the last weekend of the season. I think it's more muddy than it was in 2023 and 2024 to a degree where those 2 years, the committee really just didn't wind up having to make a lot of choices. It became because Princeton and Michigan, basically the same thing happened because Princeton and Michigan won the AQs in their leagues, and they weren't. Michigan, I think in 2023 would have been. I don't know if they would have got in, but it would have been on the bubble. But that allowed for it to really just became pretty simple for the committee. And in that sense, I think this year is more. I think we know the teams involved, but how it's going to play out and the number of teams kind of in the mix, I think is closer to 2022 than it was the last two seasons. And then going back further than that is 2021 basically doesn't really count because it was a different scenario entirely. And then after that, 2019, I mean, we've been doing this a while. That's a long time ago now. I don't really remember. Cornell got the short end of the stick at the end, which
that was kind of what I was going to say. Is if you go back to 2019, that's kind of the common trend. Is that unfortunately Cornell seems to be the one getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Which hopefully for their case won't happen this year. But I imagine if you're a Cornell fan and you see number one in the country but ninth in RPI, you probably have some residual trauma from a couple of the. Gosh, Cornell getting the short end of the stick in the from the tournament committee goes back like literally decades. And what was it? There was the 07 team that went undefeated and got seeded fourth. Rob Pennell's team that made the Final Four got unseeded, even though they were. I forget. It's been too long, but they were like in some of the computer ranking stuff like that, which again isn't a selection criteria. I forget where they won like RPI and stuff. They were like number one in the country.
It was 2018. They beat Syracuse, but had to go to Syracuse.
Yes, that was that one they beat.
So
that was Maryland in the quarterfinal.
That was the 8-9 game, and they didn't bother flipping based on the head-to-head result in 18. So crazy stuff with Cornell.
So I think that's probably if folks being most. I don't know. I haven't seen necessarily how Twitter's talking about anything like that, but I imagine the Cornell thing is probably what's maybe driving some of the confusion. And Ohio State is probably what's driving a lot of the confusion. You have two that's like Mark said. You have two of the top three teams in the country, at least by the most recent media poll, are 9th and 11th in RPI, which is very much unlike what we saw the last couple of years, where it was pretty much a mirror side by side to one another.
I can kind of get it with Cornell because their biggest games kind of still to play.
It makes sense when you look.
I think what Utah's loss is just. I think that alone, if they just won that, they would be.
If they won that, if they won that, they'd be number one in the country. Yeah. I don't know the RPI. I don't know where they.
So I actually could tell you real quick. Give me just a second.
All right, okay.
0.833 times 0.25 plus 0.6265. Ohio State would be 8th in RPI had they won that game. Undefeated, they would be 8th. So probably still not as high as people would want.
No,
would want, yeah, but
I mean, this is one of the first years I can think of where the strength of schedule element feels very notable. Again, in the past, I don't think there's two teams who, in Cornell and Ohio State, are pretty clearly the prime examples of this. I don't think there's been, and maybe Penn State perhaps to a degree as well, as a reverse. I don't think there's been a year where how you scheduled is so evident within the results for a couple of these teams. That for Ohio State, a lot of the teams they played early in the season, Bellarmine, I think, Cleveland State, so on and so forth, is kind of showing up here. Cornell, I don't know if they had as many weaker teams on the schedule, perhaps, but just maybe not as many high-end opportunities in the same way that their Ivy League compatriot Princeton had. And for both teams, there's a degree of the schedule just didn't shake out. I mean, Ohio State played 3 of the 4 Final Four teams from last year in the non-conference. The problem is 2 of those 4 are probably not going to make the NCAA tournament in Denver and Virginia. And that goes, Cornell, Denver was sort of their marquee non-con team, or Syracuse. The Syracuse thing always trips me up. But their second after Syracuse was Denver. And
especially
Denver,
early in this part of the season.
Denver is in RPI 34 or something, 35? I think.
So
35. There you go.
We'll talk more about how the strength of schedule aspect is affecting this after I guess we go through the bracket. But quickly to clarify about Cornell, I think part of the problem is that teams that they've played so far have worse records than how good it seems like they are. So, for example, Brown is 3-7 right now. So Cornell gets less credit for playing Brown at 3-7 than Ohio State gets for playing Bellarmine, for example. Bellarmine right now is 6-7. So from RPI perspective, RPI doesn't care how good the team is; it cares what the team's record is. And a lot of the teams on Cornell's record have worse schedules than it feels like how good they are, I'd say. Like Lehigh has a losing record. Denver is 1 game above 500. Brown is 3-7. Penn is under 500, etc.
Oh no, absolutely. I think also just for me, just a little bit with Cornell, like just the lack of ACC or other Big Ten teams besides Penn State, and the one that they played in the Big Ten they lost to. There was a fluke loss. We always kind of give them credit, but still an out. But
yeah.
No, I said maybe this is a good intro to actually get to the meat of our show, right?
Yeah.
So you got the clock, or we're going to kind of do a power hour style for everyone. So gotta limit ourselves here.
45 minutes. See if we can hash it all out in that time frame. All right. Should I start? We have. Should we do some of the other? Run through the different projections. It's usually how we do it. So I will. This is USA Lacrosse Magazine's Patrick Stevens.
No longer behind the paywall.
Go. Probably a good business decision. I would say. That one. Here we go. Let me share my screen there. And add it to us. All right. So, Patrick Stevens, USA Lacrosse Magazine. He has Princeton as the number 1 seed currently playing. MAAC designated AQ Sacred Heart, America East designated AQ Vermont. 8 seed Syracuse against. Does he have Army designated as the AQ?
Yeah, Stevens goes by highest in RPI.
So Patriot designated AQ. Army, that would obviously be a former long time kind of non-conference game. He has them in Hempstead, so if Ryan's listening, just wishing it into existence that Syracuse winds up in Hempstead. He has 5 seed Cornell as the Ivy League AQ against Georgetown as the Big East AQ. 4 seed Penn State has an at-large against A10 AQ Richmond. 3 seed North Carolina as an at-large out of the ACC. Pardon me, all ACC teams that get in are obviously at-larges versus Coastal, CAA, whatever you want to call it, AQ Towson. 6 seed Harvard against Duke. This will be the only at-large versus at-large first-round game that he is projecting here. 7-seeded Big Ten AQ Ohio State against Notre Dame. That'd be obviously a first-round rematch. And 2-seeded Maryland as an at-large against ASUN AQ Jacksonville or NEC AQ Robert Morris in the playing game. There are 2 playing games this year. Last 3 teams in his field are Syracuse, Notre Dame, and Duke. First 3 on the outside would be a trio of Big Ten teams: Michigan, Johns Hopkins, and Rutgers. I guess moving in from his last projection: Duke, Georgetown, Towson, Vermont, out Binghamton, Hofstra, Marquette, and Michigan. 4 ACC teams, 3 Big Ten teams, and 3 Ivy League teams. Oop. It's not there.
Ohio State at 7 is a little low, especially looking at marks. But.
Well, give me one moment. Because I'm going to pull up Inside Lacrosse's projection. This is from last week, so it is a little out of date, obviously, with the results of this past weekend. I think they do theirs on
Thursday.
Yep. Wednesday or Thursday. I think Thursday, because we didn't talk about it on the show a week ago. So it was after
the 3rd. Yeah, we dropped it on the 3rd.
The podcast. Let me see. Yeah, let me see. Okay, here we go. So this is from Inside Lacrosse. Terry Foy. They have the selection criteria embedded in theirs. Also, the committee this year. Bye-bye, Joe Brushy. I feel like he was on there forever.
Man of integrity.
So, again, this is from last week, so it's not... This is from last year. Or not last year, goodness. Last week. So, some things have changed based on results of this weekend. He had Maryland as the 1 seed last week. Army and Syracuse in first-round game. Carolina is the 4 seed playing Richmond out of the A10. Harvard is a 5 seed playing Fairfield out of the CAA. Sacred Heart of the MAC playing 3 seed Notre Dame. Duke playing 6 seed Penn State. Michigan against Cornell. Cornell is the 7 seed. And Princeton playing Vermont or Jacksonville. Marquette out of the Big East because of the and Marquette was first place in the in RPI. They were for the highest ranked RPI team out of the Big East last week, and they did. Marquette and Georgetown went to overtime, 2 overtimes, I think, this past weekend. The Hoyas got the win, and Cleveland State, the NEC. The big noticeable thing here was at the time, and we'll have to see if this. I imagine it probably will change based off the results from this weekend. Was no Ohio State Buckeyes in IL's first projection.
So I would say that the most interesting the most interesting thing to me to see will be not whether Ohio State is in the field, but where they are in the field. Like I think it's pretty clear that IL will probably move Ohio State into the field, but are they the last team in? Are they a seed? I think seeing how much they change their call on that will be interesting to see as we move toward Thursday.
Agreed.
Notre Dame
And-
at 3.
Yeah, I know that
again,
guy.
this is their first draft, but Notre Dame at 3 also seemed like high. For like just even before the Syracuse loss, they didn't really have a top 10 win. I think there's one, and that was Duke at 10.
Yeah,
or
but
at
Duke, I
least
think,
Duke
was.
at 10 right now.
Look, it's
Maybe
one or
they were
two.
higher.
It's one or two spots. Last week, I think they were like 9th or.
So best wouldn't be Duke. I just
So
generous making that 3 seed with that on the resume.
I'm not saying I agree with the call, but to explain why IL had Notre Dame third, it's because they were third in RPI and strength of schedule heading into the last weekend.
Last week, yeah.
So, I mean, if you're heavily leaning on those metrics, it makes sense. But I'm sure we'll have a chat about that later, about how much we should be leaning on those metrics right now.
Yeah, certainly. I had a couple. We can get into this after we go through Mark's. But the number of wins that these teams have, a lot of these teams have, especially in comparison to the top 2 teams, Princeton and Maryland, is. I mean, we'll show you Mark's data table here in a second when I pull it up. Those 2 teams stand out significantly when you look at the left-hand side of the column in comparison to, frankly, a lot of other teams, which is obviously why they're the 1 and 2 seeds. But it's a big, kind of gulf in some ways, again, compared to past years. All right, so I screen here, and we'll have the data table up on one side, and then we will have Mark's bracketology projection on the left-hand side as I present my screen here. So you guys will be, if you're watching this if you're listening to this in podcast form, free to go to @FieldieStick on Twitter. You can pull them up as we go along. But if you are watching this on YouTube when we upload it, we'll have it presented for you. So it's a little easier to see and kind of visualize as we go through it. So bear with me here, folks. Find this. We will add this, and I will go side by side. So Mark has Princeton as number 1 seed, same as Patrick Stevens, against Canisius out of the MAC or Robert Morris. I'll go left to right. 8-seeded Cornell against Army. 4-seeded Harvard playing Towson. Army is a at-large, worth noting in this. 5-seeded Syracuse playing BU, who is the Patriot League AQ. This one. 2-seeded Maryland against Bryant or Jacksonville out of either the America East or A-Sun. 7-seeded Penn State against Notre Dame. 3-seeded Ohio State against Georgetown, and 6-seeded North Carolina against Richmond. Last 2 teams in, Army and Notre Dame. First 4 teams out are Duke, Michigan, Rutgers, and Johns Hopkins.
Jake, thank you so much for closing that and getting Hopkins on the board here. That's the most important thing, is that we show Hopkins here.
I needed to see it. I couldn't see it. I'm like, who's this 4th team?
So one important thing to note is that because of the difference in call on Patriot League AQ, my bubble is basically shrunk by 1 spot compared to what Stevens had. So if you gave Army the Patriot League AQ in my bracket, Duke would move into the field.
Okay. I will also note, just for the purposes of the RPI, Towson just beat Loyola in double overtime, so I will try and pull up the when we mention this, any possible changes. I'm going to run it like right now in the Blacks Reference Simulator, just so we have the most up-to-date information as we do this. I don't think it caused many significant changes, but just going to note that, and if there's anything we point out here, I will kind of call it out depending on if it changed. That just went. Final, Towson beat Loyola 13-12 in double overtime.
Is Towson capable of playing anything other than a 1-goal game?
No. Don't think so.
All right, so differences, similarities. What do you guys want to talk about here? I think there's a couple hot topics, but maybe we save those for the end.
No, I think we can
jump right into.
Yeah, I guess the major two things I would probably say are differences compared to others, and just the kind of hot button topics that I think we can start with those, and then any other nitpicks we can address later. Let's do Ohio State and Cornell, because that seems like probably what's going to grab most people's attention for as long as, pardon me, where they're at in the RPI.
All right, so you guys had a question come in on the post you made about people to ask questions. This one's from Robert Brown. It says, quote, how much does he take into account a school's RPI and SOS? Doesn't the selection committee give a lot of weight to both? Maybe too much weight. I'm assuming he means me. So
yeah.
I think that's very relevant for Ohio State, which is why I brought up that question, is that I think you're seeing the difference between how I approach this and how other people tend to approach this, of that, yes, the selection committee does indeed take into account a team's RPI and strength of schedule a lot when they do the final selections and seeding. The thing is, we're not there yet. We don't have a final RPI. We don't have the final strength of schedule. Now, we have a representative RPI. It's April. But Ohio State is currently 11th. And if you do simulations on the rest of the season, that's about their floor. That even if they lose their 3 remaining games, they're going to finish about 11th in RPI. Now, there's a good chance that they don't lose all 3 games and they finish higher than 11th. So I'm a little confused as to why we should be taking into account what is definitely not the final RPI so heavily, instead of looking at what these teams have actually accomplished in terms of wins and losses. Because to me, when you look at Ohio State, they have clearly the 3rd best set of wins on the board. Jake was talking about how Maryland and Princeton really jump off the board. And Ohio State isn't quite to that level, but they're the closest thing on the board to having that collection of wins as the top 2 current seeds. And the other way of looking at this is that Ohio State's 11th in RPI, so it doesn't really matter as much that they have, a top 5 win, another 6 through 10 win, and then 3 11 through 20 wins. Just the RPI says they're 11th, so they've got to be within 3 or 4 spots of that. 7th is as high as we can put them. So it's a difference in perspectives. But to answer the question that was asked, yes, this stuff does matter, but I would caveat it as it matters a lot at the end when we have the final data.
Absolutely. That's what I was feeling. Like, I didn't think they would go below that. The only team kind of in their neighborhood it kind of feels like Harvard, because that Syracuse game is starting to get more appreciate value after their win of Notre Dame. But yeah, it was kind of, again, Terry had his reasoning, well written article, but yeah, when I first saw it, it was like Ohio State not making it, and I was like, I just felt that wasn't so. Just because what I felt like the rest of the season, I didn't see them going 0 for 4. That was before the game this weekend against. But like, I just didn't see them like out of the tournament. But again, like, maybe I'm looking too far ahead and stuff like that. And they're just taking a snapshot of right now. But even of right now, I just saw their, looking at their schedule, like I just didn't see them being left out.
So
even with the Utah loss.
I don't want to put words in the mouth of quote the public, but seeing the outcry on what Inside Lacrosse put by lacrosse fans, I think having Ohio State out of the field felt wrong to people. Maybe they didn't know why it felt wrong, but it didn't seem right to them.
No, 100%. And I think to go off of
they're not going to be Bucknell in 1996, right? What was that, 12-0? Like left out.
Yeah. When I sent out a tweet, I think, because I think people's immediate reaction was, Marcel was kind of, it didn't feel right. And then people jumped to sort of this is why the criteria selection committee or RPI, everything is absolutely insane, that Ohio State wouldn't make the tournament. And I wanted to kind of temper, I guess, some of it from what I saw. I was like, part of the reason I said, look, Ohio State will make the NCAA tournament. I mean, look, and they're not a lock. I know he has, do I have it up here? Yeah, he has Princeton and Maryland as the two teams locked, which basically, Mark, is they could lose out the rest of the way and they'd still make the NCAA tournament. If I'm, kind of what we've discussed, that's how,
And I think Ohio State and Syracuse are knocking on the door of that, but it's probably just a little bit too marginal to say that they have locked in yet.
Yeah. And so, yeah, they're pretty darn close. But the point was that because, as you guys alluded to, yeah, Ohio State, their RPI might be 11th. As Mark said, that's the floor of how it's going to go. They're not going to fall to 12, 13, 14, 15. And a team with these wins that's 11th in RPI or at worst, or maybe even high, probably likely even higher, in the top 10, is not going to be left out of the field. That's just not going to happen. And there were some people with some good replies, kind of mentioning, and Mark
from the best conference. That's not to interrupt you, Jake, but it's like that's what exacerbated the point. It's just like they're leading with.
Safe freeze.
He's frozen on my end.
Oh, all right. Safe's frozen, so we'll see what happens. I'll hit him up to let him know. But yeah, it's the Ohio State.
Safe, what were you saying there? You were frozen for just a second.
I lost. Yeah, it was. I was just saying, like, Ohio State is coming from the Big Ten, which is right now the best conference, like just number wise and out of conference pitch. I think maybe the ACC had like a 1,000% better, but like Big Ten had more teams, in playing. So like Ohio State leading the conference. Again, this was just before the win over Hopkins, but I think that's what jumped out. A lot of people like. Best team in the best conference not making the tournament. That, like I said, I think that amplified why there was such a outcry about like it didn't seem right that they weren't in.
Yeah, and again, go ahead, Mark.
Every Big Ten team's on the board, even Hopkins. Hopkins is not out of this.
Yeah, like it's. I mean, it's a super deep league, and the results as we've seen them over the past couple weeks. I mean, it's literally an inversion of the preseason poll, which was, I think, Hopkins, Maryland, Penn State, and I think maybe Ohio State, Michigan, Rutgers 4, 5, 6, or Michigan, Ohio State, Rutgers 4, 5, 6. It's now Ohio State, Rutgers, Michigan. Pardon me, 1, 2, 3. Maryland, Penn State, Hopkins 4, 5, 6. But yeah, Ohio State is going to be. They're going to be fine. We're looking at 5 top 20 wins, and that's second most to Maryland and Princeton. They're the one of only 3 other teams that has a Rutgers obviously picking up the win, but Maryland, Princeton, Ohio State have 6 top 5 wins combined between the 3 of them. The rest of the board has 3 or 4, Michigan, and their top 20 wins between them is 17, and the rest of the board here has 28. So we're talking just quick math, like that gives you an idea. The wins and losses look a lot closer to. I mean, Harvard's actually, to mention, Harvard's a good comparison because they both have the bad loss, albeit Harvard's to Colgate is still Colgate's 21st in RPI after the Towson Loyola game.
Can I present a hypothetical that we talked about earlier in the week?
Go ahead.
If Harvard had beaten Princeton and you hold everything else identical, like you hold all the RPI ranks the same, Harvard and Ohio State have the same wins and losses.
Yeah, that's true.
So why are we devaluing Ohio State so much? Because Harvard didn't beat Princeton. Harvard lost. Ohio State has better wins and losses than Harvard does right now. Like, clearly. Strictly better, I would say.
Yeah, they got a top 5 win that Harvard does not have, and they have an extra top 20 win that Harvard does not have. So I agree on that point. And it's again, there was some good replies. Someone was mentioning on the in the reply talking about the committee recently having strayed pretty close to the RPI order in terms of seeds of teams and things like that. Within the last couple of years, I think everything's within 3 or 4 spots. I think that's worth maybe keeping in mind as an idea of what they're going to do. But I think, to Mark's point again, it's not a final. It's not a final illustration. And 2, like there is just like in the past they have deviated. There have been occasions where they've deviated more, sort of like what I would call outlier cases. Think Duke 2022, where they were seeded, in RPI they were I think 7th on Selection Sunday, but they were obviously not in the field, and that was because Duke had 3 bad losses, which is pretty historically kind of a large number for a team in the at-large conversation. Albany back in the day I remember there was, I think it might have been 2018 as well, but in 2017, Albany was seeded significantly lower than I believe their maybe final RPI indicated. Now again, we're going way, way back. That was the year Albany had to play Maryland in the quarterfinal. They were seeded 8th. And that was kind of a surprise, certainly, because Albany was the top 5 team in the country in the media polls and everything like that. And again, I think their RPI was 3rd or something like that. I can look it up. But so there is historical kind of that the committee has deviated from it. And also, I just think it's worth, again, to go back to the point I made about maybe 30 minutes ago now. This is, I think, a different year at this moment in time that requires the committee to make. Again, they've had pretty much an easy job the last 2 years. There just hasn't been a lot of calls they really had to make. I know last year there was a lot of people got up in arms about the Maryland thing, but frankly, from the data perspective, that was close, but not really a significant conversation. And then 2023, I can't really recall anything that might have been the most controversy-free.
The deal that year was it was going to be a call between Penn and Denver, but then Michigan won the Big Ten, so neither one of them got in.
Yeah, that was just nothing. This year, we'll see. I mean, maybe it'll change, but there's probably going to be conversations that will be had. And teams on the boat, last team in, first team out, maybe last 2 teams, first team out. The seeds, as we can tell, is going to cause a significant, I think, conversation. I think this disparity will lessen, but I still think there will be a kind of a discussion about this.
So there's two things that you just said that I want to grab onto. One, this can change, and two, this disparity will lessen. Will you pull up the current RPI and sort by part 2?
Yes. Let me go RPI rankings.
So while you're doing that, why are Ohio State and Cornell low in RPI right now?
All right, is this the one I have? No, I need the one with Lacrosse reference RPI.
Yeah.
That's the one I need. This should do it.
Yep. Click
yeah.
I think you updated at 8 o'clock. So it could be.
Try to expand the window. That might do it. Like if you make it wider.
There we go. Perfect.
So sort that by part 2, and we'll find out why Ohio State and Cornell are so low.
Yes, we talked about this on the pod the Power Hour on Saturday.
So the other
Cornell and Ohio State are 34th and 37th, respectively.
The other current outlier, I would say, as it feels to most people in RPI relative to what they've done, is Notre Dame. And look at where Notre Dame is in the second part of RPI.
Still going.
Second. So the thing that you said about that things will sort of level out, that's what's going to happen to these numbers. All the outliers in either direction are going to come back toward sort of a central point. Like, no, they're not going to absolutely level out. Princeton is going to be strong in RPI no matter what happens from here. But these real outliers like Ohio State and Cornell that have very poor strength of schedule numbers currently, those numbers are going to come back up as we go. And teams that are unusually high seeming like Notre Dame are going to regress. So this is going to happen because some of the weaker teams that Ohio State and Cornell played are now in conference play, and they're going to start winning games. For example, Air Force is, I don't even know where they are in RPI.
Let me switch back over to the RPI column. Air Force is 44th.
Right above Utah.
All right. Air Force is currently, hold on just a second. What's Air Force's record right now?
3-7. Same with Utah.
I kind of bet that Air Force is going to win a little more than 30% of their games the rest of the year, playing in a Sun right now. So, no, Ohio State's probably not going to end up on top of the board in RPI just because of who they played. But the extremity to which they're being pushed down the list right now is going to cancel itself out some.
I want to see like what happens after this weekend. I mean, Jake and I have been talking about this Maryland game for a little while, just with Glovegate and everything. But do you have the numbers if they beat Maryland, Mark, or I could jump?
I can run it through the sim real quick. While I'm doing that, I have a task for Jake because I know he's pretty good at looking at brackets the way that I think about them, I guess.
What?
Jake, do a comparison on Army and Cornell for me real quick.
Sure.
Like in terms of wins and losses.
Yeah. So we have it on the right side of the column here. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, I'll run through each of the data points specifically. So we got Army and Cornell record identical at 9-1. RPI for Army is 8th to Cornell being 9th, and that did not change with the results. It's very close. It's Army 0.638 to Cornell's 634. Strength of schedule is Army's 24th, which is I want to say lowest of any team, or Dartmouth is actually at 37th. So second lowest of any team right here. Cornell 17th. Wins are very comparable. I mean, you could honestly argue virtually identical. Cornell has a win over Princeton. Army has the top 5 win over North Carolina as well. And then they both have a top 20 win over Rutgers and Richmond. So this is two teams who are, if you're looking at it, it's pretty close to a mirror. Kind of can't really split those two by much.
To finish that off real quick, I probably would lean Cornell on that because the loss isn't as bad, and I probably care more about that than I do the one spot difference in RPI. The reason I brought this up is Cornell's the other hot topic on seeding.
Yes.
I find it difficult to say with the current data set that they should be much higher than 7, 8, somewhere in that range. To look at Patrick Stevens' bracket with his current seedings, like I understand everything on there. I'm not in total agreement, obviously. I think Ohio State's way too low. But my question would be, why the big difference between Cornell and Army? Why is Cornell 5th and Army's unseeded? Because to me, those look almost identical.
Yeah. Cornell thing is tough because I think very highly of them. I think they're final. I mean, look, I literally picked them to win the national championship this start of the year. But me and Safe Talk, we agree that, they're a Final Four caliber team. And intuitively, people see 8 seeds and don't think. I mean, I don't know if this is how they're thinking, but look, only one 8 seed has ever. No, sorry. Yes. I think only one 8 seed ever has made the Final Four. I think it was Syracuse in '99.
Okay, so I was thinking since expansion, it had never happened.
Since expansion, in the 16-team tournament era, it has never. The only time a 1 seed lost was Syracuse to Maryland, and Maryland was unseeded. So, yeah, and people don't see 8 seed and think Final Four caliber team. I could see Cornell. The most I could move them up would be, and me and Mark talked about this, I would say probably maybe 6th. Maybe having them, because Penn State has to be, maybe not, it has to be, but the Penn State and Cornell, the difference is that Penn State's win over Cornell is 9th, and Cornell's win over Princeton is 1st, so it's a top 5 versus top 10. And then there's the gap in RPI. But Penn State, the head-to-head win here is pretty significant with these two teams. And like Safe mentioned, whatever we want to think about how that game played out and how if you played that game again, I mean, honestly, nothing about that game is really, I think, from a way I think of the two teams, I don't think anything about that game is indicative. Penn State was down their entire starting attack. Cornell blew a 4-goal lead with 4 minutes left because they took a 2-minute non-releasable penalty. But as Mark mentioned, the game happened, and there's no margin of victory isn't relevant. Lacrosse hasn't yet leapt to the insane college football playoff. Florida State's down their starting quarterback or whatever, so we're going to leave them out even though they're undefeated. And that's not on the selection criteria. Is player injuries.
I think that's a good thing. It's not on there.
Yes, for 100%. So I think Penn State ahead of Cornell is the right call. The only one I could say is I think you could have Cornell over North Carolina. Cornell's top 2 wins are better than North Carolina's next 3, which are Michigan, Hopkins, and Virginia. 13, 15, 20. It's not really. It's now 13, 15, and 19. Virginia moved up 1 spot in RPI with the Towson Loyola result. A top 5. We were talking about this. If you look at 6, 7, 8, and then Army being here 9, the North Carolina stands out a little bit among this cluster because Cornell and Army have a top 5 win, and then Penn State has a top 10 win, whereas Carolina's wins are all, in the top 20 range. Carolina's another team that I don't know if people are discussing it necessarily, but when you think of difference between perception and their resume, Carolina has one of the more, I would say, ordinary set of wins on the board. People, I don't know what the kind of common perception is around North Carolina right now. But Yeah, their wins are very similar to Duke, for instance.
It feels to me like the perception about North Carolina is built primarily on beating Hopkins by 1 goal, and that seems like it's gotten progressively less valuable as the season has gone.
Yeah, and like I mean, they blew out Michigan, but that one's kind of risen a bit in stock. Michigan's a weird team.
I was just looking at Michigan because when you guys were talking about Cornell and Army, I was like, the win column, maybe they don't have the 20 plus wins that Cornell and Army have, but like they kind of have almost identical wins to both Army and Cornell. Like
they have 5 losses though.
I got to know.
For sure. But like the 5, those are that Barry Bonds joke that we always say, Jake. You know, those are 5 hard losses. You know,
they are, but five losses is 5 losses.
I was just thinking, is like if they, I don't know if they're going to beat Ohio State, but if they beat Rutgers with 1 game of the Big Ten tournament, Cornell's got a heavy load with Harvard, Cuse, Dartmouth. They should be favored, and they have historically not done great in the Ivy League tournament. Like Cornell goes like 1 and 3 the rest of the way. Michigan.
How much money are you going to put on Cornell going 1 and 3?
I mean, the Cuse game, I think I'm going Cuse.
Are you going to pick Harvard over them?
Yeah, that's we got to talk about that. You know,
I'm not.
Hold on.
I was like Harvard. I mean, they can bang. Those boys can score, dude. We thought they were going to dump it against Dartmouth last week, and they were like, actually, no, that's not going to happen today on our watch.
I also know that Harvard has the worst defense of any by like far, and I don't want to see.
Maybe it's like that back-to-back joke that we have. They're just going to shoot their way out of it, Jake.
CJ Kurtz looking at that Harvard defense is like a bank robber looking at low security.
Look, I'm not
Wait,
saying.
Where is that? Is that in Cambridge or is that in Ithaca?
I think it's in Ithaca, but I'll check.
I'm not saying it's going to happen. But if Harvard does beat Cornell, all of a sudden there's a 3-way tie for first in the Ivy League, and Cornell may have like a very difficult Ivy League semifinal too.
Well,
I was just saying that to Jake. Like since 2019, they beat Princeton every year in the regular season, but lost in the first round of the Ivy League tournament. 3 years to Yale in a row, and then Penn last year.
The game is in Cambridge too. It's Cornell at Harvard.
Yeah, that doesn't change my. I'm sorry, Cornell offense against Harvard.
Quickly, because
Jake, it's Cambridge Day.
Quickly,
didn't Ryan mention that they're not even like
it's official Cambridge Day, April 19th. Is that your birthday, or is that am I off?
No, the 25th. 25th. Isn't Harvard Stadium like not even in Cambridge? We're getting off track, but yeah. I don't know if it is.
So quickly, while you're looking at that, Safe was talking about Michigan's wins. Why aren't we talking about Rutgers' wins? They're the same.
That was the other one. Yeah, the left side of the column, that Maryland win is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Now, the problem with Rutgers is that they basically look like worse Michigan because the losses are much worse and their metrics are worse, but the wins are the same.
Yeah, and the metrics aren't that much of a difference.
Now, if they beat Michigan this week, they're right back in it, I think.
Yeah, there was a Rutgers fan asking what they could possibly do, or were they out of it? Was the Big Ten the Big Ten AQ their only path? And it's like, no, I mean they gotta. None of these Big Ten teams, their only path is the AQ. It's just you got to do a lot of Rutgers. You got to beat Michigan. You probably got to beat Penn State too.
What do you say we run through all the relevant conferences real quick to wrap up and kind of say what we think these teams might need to do to get in?
Absolutely.
Safe to answer you real quick on the Ohio State thing. If they beat Maryland this week, like only that result, nothing else, they would move to 8th in RPI. And if they lose, they stay at 11th. 11th is like seriously their floor in RPI.
Yeah, they're not going to dip below that. And Jake, to answer yours, it's over the river, but it's in actual Boston.
It's in Boston. It's in Boston. Oh, that's funny. All right, yeah, we'll go Big Ten first. Or how about this? We'll do Ivy first. Princeton's the 1 seed. So Princeton lock. They're going to make the NCAA tournament. Mark, what is Princeton's floor as a seed?
Probably like 4 or 5, I'd say.
Okay.
But most likely higher than that.
Yeah, I think Maryland and Princeton might, in these projections, trade the 1 and 2 seed back and forth a couple of times. The rest of
so the thing with Princeton, it's not worth getting too much into weeds, but Princeton can take a few bad losses still.
Yeah, like you're just those wins are only one other team has those wins, and
the Rutgers win is coming out of nowhere to potentially, at least be in the top 20 now.
The reason I said like it could bounce back and forth is Princeton for the moment. Yale could move into the top 20. That one's sitting at 23. Penn, that's happening. But potentially a little more wiggle room for Maryland, obviously, if they beat Ohio State this weekend. They got Hopkins after that. So I think they could trade it back and forth, but feels kind of for Princeton, realistically their floor feels like maybe 3. So they're in a good spot. Cornell, Mark, what is Cornell's floor just overall?
Probably missing the NCAA tournament.
It's like not making it. That's the floor, Jake.
I mean, let's talk about it. If they do lose all 4 games,
if they lose, that's. Let's say if they go 2 and 2,
I'd say low seed probably then.
Okay.
Which that probably would feel right to most people, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, if they split Harvard and Cuse and they beat Dartmouth and they lose in the Ivy League semifinal, I think the perception around them is a lot. It kind of would be like what happened in 23, where they were in the top 5 and then they stumbled a bit towards the end of the season. They did beat Princeton at Princeton that year, right? No, they beat them in Ithaca at the end of that was
overtime. Ithaca and then they beat them Princeton last year.
I was thinking of the 22 game where they beat them in 1952.
Princeton, that was packed. That's it.
So I think it would feel in 2023 they wound up as the 8th seed and they obviously lost to Michigan. But towards the end when they stumbled, the 8th seed felt a little more on close than it was a couple weeks prior. So I think 8 feels, this spot feels, and it's maybe not their absolute floor, but their realistic floor feels like where they are right now.
Let's say that Cornell beats Dartmouth and loses the other 3. How do you think that turns out?
I don't know.
I think it's bubble. I mean,
yeah, like I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, not out. It could be what other people do because they could lose their games and not take advantage of that opening. But yeah, they're bubble if they. Yeah,
they would be on the bubble. I mean, maybe Yale would get in there for them.
So the reason I brought that up is kind of all year I've been thinking that Harvard really needed to beat either Cornell or win their Ivy League semifinal. I think that's kind of flipped now. I think Cornell really needs it.
Yeah, and I think Cornell will be fine. But yeah, that's a good. That kind of explains. I think it more better illustrates why they are where they are. At this moment in time, what's their ceiling?
Probably like 2 or 3 seed, I guess.
I
mean, if they win out, they could be number 1 possibly.
Yeah, when I put it out there last week, I don't think any team's winning out the rest of the way. So, we'll see if Maryland obviously lost this. Notre Dame lost this weekend. So that's 2 teams off the board. We'll see if I'm proven right over these next couple weeks.
Haven't been great on the road. The Richmond game was a dogfight that they were down significantly. Brown, they kind of pulled it away the last 8 minutes, but that was like a tie game, with like less than 10 to play. And then they got Cuse away.
No, Cuse is a neutral site.
Yeah, but not Ithaca. Essentially, yeah.
Also, that game's also Syracuse outdoors though.
What's I'm just gonna say it should be like 50-ish better than what it was at Maryland. But then the Harvard game, depending on what they do, Dartmouth and the Harvard game, maybe they don't host the Ivy League tournament.
Oh, safe, buddy. Uniondale on Saturday, 43 with an 80% chance of rain.
That sounds like ethical weather for sure.
Doesn't sound
that was like
does not sound like
last year. Like, and now we know like all bets are off when those two.
What is it? Syracuse puts on the like box score PDF. Always 70 and sunny in the dome. Doesn't sound like that.
It's not that. Not gonna be that.
Mark, Harvard. What is Harvard's floor?
See, you're asking me this, and if they're not a lock, the answer's missing. But
yeah, let's go realistic. We kind of
Harvard's realistic floor is probably bubble one way or the other. If things don't go right from them for here,
they look. It's gone better and better for them.
The thing is that those BU and Dartmouth wins might not hold up.
Yes, that's what I would be concerned about. And at that point, they become very similar to Michigan and Rutgers. If those don't hold up, the metrics are a lot better. But if you presume they lose that Cornell game, which they could win, but I'll go with Cornell on that one. Penn probably not going to do anything for them. At that point, I think it does look a little different. Their ceiling probably right about where it is now?
Fourth, that's probably about as high as unless they win the Ivy League tournament, in which case, who knows?
Yeah, they feel like I think they're going to make it probably, but 4 feels like a little bit. I don't think that's going to be where they wind up. I do think they could get a home game, but the home game might be like maybe you wind up with Cornell and Harvard basically flipping spots by the end of the year.
So, in the sake of completion, let's run through the other 4 real quick because I won't say that all of them are AQ or bust, but they're close to it.
Yeah. Actually, I feel comfortable, I think, with it because Dartmouth.
I mean, if Dartmouth beats Cornell and wins their Ivy League semifinal, they're on the board.
That's true. Yeah. They'd be on the board. They would still have to. I mean, if they beat Cornell, they have to beat Yale too, because if they beat Cornell but lose to Yale, that's probably 2 Ivy League wins. And they got Brown too, so they might be. That Yale game is honestly more important to them than the Cornell game is.
Probably.
Because
in terms of getting into the Ivy League tournament, it is.
Yeah.
And then with Yale, Yale also kind of has an outside at large chance, but a lot of things they pretty much have to win out until they don't have to, or until they can't. They need to win 5 in a row to have any chance at an at large.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've been saying about Yale since March 1st. Like you're not in must win mode, but you're basically in must win mode.
And then Penn is actually literally in must-win mode because they're currently 4-7. They have Harvard, Princeton, and Notre Dame left, and they have to win all 3 of them to finish 7-7.
Yikes!
Yeah. And Brown is actually AQ or bust because they can't finish above 500.
There we go. All right, we'll do Big Ten now. Maryland. What's Maryland's floor as a seed? Because they're going to be in.
It's probably about like Princeton, the 4 or 5. Like if things really go terribly wrong.
All right. And their ceiling?
Number 1 seed.
Number 1 seed. There we go. Pretty straightforward. All right. Ohio State. Ohio State's floor.
Probably bubble in if they lose out, which actually is possible. They could lose out. Those games are hard enough that they could.
Yeah. It's not. Their Big Ten quarterfinal would probably be. Gosh, I don't.
It probably would be Hopkins. I would.
I don't know because if they lose out, they'd be 3-2. Maryland would be 3-2. God, imagine the first place in the Big Ten just being like a 3-way 3-2 tie.
Like a 5-way 3-2 tie, and Hopkins is 0-5.
That's what we said, wasn't it? Like there could be like 14-3-2 or
I mean, Maryland, because Ohio State can lose to Maryland and still if they beat Michigan, win the Big Ten in the regular season.
Yeah.
But if they lose, and Michigan, let's say Michigan splits Michigan beats Ohio State, loses to Rutgers, that put them 3-2. Let's say Rutgers beats Michigan but splits with Penn State, that put them 3-2. And if Penn State won out, that would put them 3-2. God, I hope this happens now. That'd be sick.
Go ahead and get Chris on it to let him figure out the tiebreakers.
God, that'd be sick. Ohio State's ceiling.
I honestly think they could be the 1 seed if they went out. I don't see why they couldn't be.
Yeah, it would require Princeton to, I think, trip up a little bit.
I think Ohio State has more chances to add to what they have than Princeton does.
Certainly. I'm just thinking the RPI difference probably was. I mean, Princeton's going to be number 1 in RPI probably until the end of the season. And Ohio State does have that loss to Utah. Whereas, again, if Princeton doesn't lose to Penn or you losing to Yale would probably wind up in the top 20.
They would have that common opponent thing. If Ohio State could win this week and somehow beats Maryland in the Big Ten championship game, I think they could take it from Princeton, even if Princeton won out.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Ohio State wins up, they're going to take a loss somewhere here. But if they did win out, like every win would be top 20 basically, and they'd be like 15-1. So, but I think where they're at is a realistic spot for them. I think, like Mark, you said, I think the numbers will catch up, and I think you will probably have them not move much, and everyone else will have them rise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 3-4 probably feels about right for where they wind up by the end of the year. All right, Penn State. Man, I mentioned this I tweeted this out on Sunday. That fourth quarter Penn State comeback against Michigan felt eerily similar in reverse to what happened to Penn State against Maryland last year, where that Maryland game, they were up by like 4 goals, and the Maryland scored 5 goals in about 4 minutes. A lot of them off of face-off wins pretty quickly. And in a lot of ways, Penn State never really recovered from that loss because they lost to Hopkins later on. It was a close game. I think they lost to Hopkins in overtime last year. And then they, in hindsight, really probably should have tried a lot more in the Big Ten final against Michigan. Because from there, they wound up on the road against Georgetown. They made it, but they went up on the road. And if they had won that Maryland game, they would have been like the 2 seed at that point in time. And they probably would have wound up definitely with a home game. They probably would have been 7th playing Princeton again at home at Panzer compared to having to go on the road to Georgetown. And that is the difference to maybe having a home game in a quarterfinal against Duke and being in that 8 spot where they lost to Georgetown in Notre Dame side. So it really, in a lot of ways, was a significant loss in their season. Here, Michigan had the lead over Penn State, 7-6, and then Penn State outscores them the rest of the way 5-1. And again, it was like 3 goals in, bang, bang, bang. And now Penn State went from having 1 win that's on the board. Now, they have a lot of other games kind of stacking up sort of here, right on the edge. And I think they would have been 7th in RPI had they lost. To now they're 3, and they have a top 10 win and win over Michigan. And it feels much more secure for them. How secure, Marcus, Penn State?
I think they're kind of in the same boat as like Cornell, where they need one more win that counts, is what they really win, either Hopkins or Rutgers, and things are probably going to work out for you. So you mentioned that all these wins that are just barely off the board. They've got 21 Colgate, 22 Navy, 23 Yale. You probably figure that one of those is going to shuffle in. I would probably say Yale myself, but one of the 3 will shuffle into the top 20. You get either Hopkins or Rutgers. You've got 4 top 20 wins. You end up 9-4 or whatever you end up. Top 6 or 7 in RPI, that's probably getting in.
And How much realistically can they rise to?
If Ohio State makes it in the top 10, they have 3 losses. All would be to the top 10 teams. If they win out, they finish 11-3 most likely. I mean, that's a very high seed, I would say. Probably 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I think they'll wind up being a seed. I think it's probably more likely where they're at. But look, playing at Panzer in the first round, I think they definitely want that as opposed to going on the road.
The thing with these Big Ten teams is like the difference between ceiling and floor in terms of where they could end up is so high because these games are so tough that no one's going to win all of them and no one's going to lose all of them.
Yep. Michigan and Rutgers. I mean, these are basically two safe comments. They're sort of peas in a pod.
And they play each other this week.
Indeed. What are we thinking with these two teams? What is Rutgers?
Let's do Rutgers.
How does Rutgers make the NCAA tournament?
All right. If they win the next 2 games in the regular season, Michigan and then Penn State, that puts them at 8-6. They cannot be in the Big Ten quarterfinals if that happened because they kind of really need to be. They need an extra game and they can't get it. So 8-6 regular season, straight to the Big Ten semifinals. They have to win that game. They absolutely have to.
Okay.
That's 9-6, and then lose the Big Ten championship to finish 9-7. I think bubble. I don't think it's impossible they can get in at large. But do you feel good at 9-7 with 2 bad losses?
Nope. I mean, the thing is, their wins would be Maryland, Penn State, Michigan, Hopkins. That's a good set of 4 wins.
And then whoever they get in the Big Ten semifinals, which is
that'd be. I mean, at 4-1, they'd probably be 2. They'd probably play Maryland. Could you beat Maryland twice in one season?
Yeah, I absolutely think that could get in the field, but you're very susceptible to if the bubble moves. You're probably first on the chopping block.
Yeah. What I will say is, who are they being compared to? I think is the question, because if it winds up being like Duke,
which is very likely,
that 2 bad losses to 1 bad loss, maybe it doesn't matter as much at that point. If you wind up being compared to, I don't know, Notre Dame, then those 2 bad losses might stick out a little bit more. Or being compared to, I don't know, North Carolina. If North Carolina took some hits in these next couple weeks, in that case, yeah, because North Carolina's not going to have. North Carolina's worst loss is going to be to probably a top 10 team, definitely a top 20 team. So who the comparison is, I think, would be very relevant for them. Michigan, how many wins do they need if they want to be an at-large?
They're 6-5 right now. I think they need 2 more to realistically be in the hunt. So that would put them at 8 wins and I assume 6 losses.
Yes.
And the thing is that if they beat Rutgers this week, they pretty much eliminate Rutgers from the at-large pool. And Rutgers looks just like them except worse. So just get rid of them as a comparison. You beat Rutgers, then you beat Ohio State. That's 8-5, or whether the win comes in the Big Ten tournament, either way, because all these wins are going to count. If Michigan gets to 8-6, I think they have a shot because what's really killing them right now is the head-to-head with Duke.
Man. Oof.
That maybe if they get 2 more wins that count, maybe you get away from that comparison with Duke.
Yeah, that Duke game feels significant. Every Duke win feels like it is hugely important to the entire season. I mean, that Richmond game, that Michigan game, that St. Joe's game was kind of close.
That Richmond game pretty much ended Richmond's season as far as an at-large chance.
And Richmond would be in the top 10 in RPI probably if they won that game. And they'd be right in the conversation. Had they won, maybe not as close to some of these other teams, but they'd be in it. they'd have the chance to St. Joe's, obviously, towards the end of the year. Go ahead, Safe.
I guess North Carolina's weaker, but I was gonna say, yeah, I felt like Duke's like the weakest of the ACC teams resume wise, but
Virginia.
yeah, but like I don't really think of the realistic tournament team. Sorry, I should have clarified that.
Yeah,
but I guess North Carolina's a little bit weaker.
Yeah, they're pretty similar.
But North Carolina doesn't have the bad loss.
That Duke loss to them again. I said every Duke game felt significant. The Denver loss also feels significant because they'd be comfortably in the tournament had they beat Denver.
We're not talking about Duke right now, so I won't get us too sidetracked. But if a tree falls in the woods and no one paid $18 to see it, did it really happen?
That might be what we talk. That might be what happens with Cornell Syracuse this weekend. We might need to pay Ryan to go on be on the ground, and give old time radio updates.
I was gonna say, yeah. Talk to one of his uncles while he's in DC.
Hey guys, I'm calling in here. CJ Kurtz just scored a crazy goal. The fans are going crazy.
$9 for a hot dog. This is.
Are you serious?
I just want one.
Okay, over under.
Oh, you didn't even do the last one, Jake.
No, hang on. I'm getting there.
Okay.
Over under 3.5 Hopkins wins rest of the way. That they need to make the NCAA tournament.
Well, I'll let Safe answer because I actually wanted him to do Hopkins anyway.
Because I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, that Penn State RPI is nice. That's one I think that Hopkins has a chance. If they get that, then suddenly they have Michigan's resume.
Yeah.
Depending on where Virginia stands, if they can stay in the top 20.
If they win that, they have Army's resume.
Exactly, them or even to an extent Cornell's.
The losses.
And then you follow up with the rivalry, which, Jake, as you know, anything can happen in the rivalry. Either it's a historic blowout or Hopkins, comes out with a surprise win like last year. That is going to be at Maryland at 8:00 at night on a Friday. So I wonder how.
So let me interject real quick before Safe answers the over under 3.5. If it's over, that means they have to win out to the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, because I was going to say
actually, it could be win out to the Big Ten. They'd have to win the Big Ten semifinal. So
2 and 3 in the Big probably get some first round bye, but I don't know exactly.
They can't. They're locked into the quarterfinals.
So then, if they win, do I think what's over under?
So if they win, if Hopkins wins 3 games the rest of the way, are they at least on the bubble?
3 wins the rest of the way. They're bumping somebody off the bubble. I don't know if they're bubble in, but they're definitely much better situated than I would have ever thought. A week and a half ago.
If they win 4, are they in?
If they win 4, they're in.
If they make the Big Ten championship game, whether they win or lose, they're in. I don't think the committee's going to. Yeah, that could be for Rutgers as well or Michigan. If those 3, if they make the Big Ten championship game and the resume they kind of have, I think they're going to get in.
So
if Mark, I guess we'll turn it over to you. Do they need 3 or do they need 4?
I think they need 3, but Safe's on the money. If they get 4, they're definitely getting in.
Yeah.
So the thing with Hopkins, and I know Safe will echo this, is the opportunities are there. I just have no belief that they're going to capitalize on them with what I've seen lately.
Basically, they're this year's North Carolina.
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm 100% Mark. I need these next few. Hey, if they win Penn State, great. I'm not going to forfeit the game, but I just need them to be very better. Maybe get a little bit healthier for the.
I think that ever since we lost to, or I say ever since Hopkins lost to Rutgers, I think that's basically been their hope this season is to get healthy for the Big Ten tournament.
I gotta believe that's why they're not playing Melendez. They'd rather have him fuller or close to full strength going into the Big Ten tournament than 60, 70%, whatever he is now.
So this isn't the Hopkins preview section, but to allow me to indulge for a second. My theory on Melendez is that Hopkins is going to play him against Maryland to see what they have with him for the Big Ten tournament.
Exactly. Yeah. Give him another week and a half of rest. I'm fine with that.
So, Jake, that was probably more hurtful than you know to say that we're this year's North Carolina.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's kind of what it feels like. Look, if they win the games, they're in. The question is, can they win the games?
The thing with North Carolina was it was always like, well, they need one of them. Well, it's like with Hopkins, it's like, well, they need three of them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the flip side is the difference in the conferences. In the ACC, it's if the range of results is like the moon to Earth. I mean, Notre Dame could be down 6 or 7 goals to Cuse, and then if you told me Notre Dame beat North Carolina by 6 next week, I'd be like, yeah, sure. The range of results in the Big Ten is like me driving to Homewood Field. It's every game is decided by 4 or 5 goals. Whoever has the best goalie wins, which is hurting Hopkins considering the quality of goalie in the Big Ten. It's enough where for North Carolina it was always hard because it's like, man, they lose by 7 to all these ACC teams. Yeah, they only need 1, but man, for Hopkins, like, man, of course I think they could win all these. I see the Big Michigan and Rutgers are 2-1 in the Big Ten right now. I see the path where anybody in the Big Ten can beat each other. The problem is, as we've seen, stringing a lot of these wins together is very hard. Mm-hmm. It's just such a minefield of a conference.
It is kind of like, not shocking, but like noticeable, like no big wins in the ACC. Syracuse over Notre Dame was the biggest win in the conference all season.
Yeah,
other big wins are like people who beat Duke, like Notre Dame.
They have the ACC. I mean, let's go. Let me do because we're going to get to the ACC and then we'll wrap it up. Let me go through here. The Ivy League has 4 top 5 wins. The Ivy League has 7 top 10 wins. So 4 top 5, 4 top 5, and 7 top 10 wins. The Big Ten has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top 5 wins. They have 9 top 10 wins. And top 20, again, do top 20. The ACC has no top 5 wins. And top 10 wins, they have 1, 2, 2.
Yeah. Top 10 wins for Duke or North Carolina. And Notre Dame's best win is Duke at 10.
Yeah. That's pretty. I mean, look, we talked about. I mentioned Syracuse was on the bubble before last week. So the ACC, we'll get to it. Syracuse, Mark, how close is Syracuse to being safe?
I think there's an argument they already are, but if you look at the 4 games they have left, it's North Carolina, Cornell, Duke, and let's say that they lose all of those. That puts them at 9-5. They're 2-2, so they make the ACC tournament. They're probably playing like North Carolina or Notre Dame in the ACC semifinals. They lose that, they end up 9-6. That's very uncomfortable on the bubble, but it probably gets in. If they win any of the 4 they have left, they're definitely in.
Okay. Can they? I mean, if they won out, which again I don't think. Let's say I don't want to do the win out thing because I just think it's so. I don't know that I trust any of these teams to win out. Let's say they go 4-1 the rest of the way. Where are they getting seeded? Probably.
I mean, they would have.
They'd be 13-3.
They'd be, and you take their wins they already have, and then you add like 4 top 10 wins. I mean, that's like 3 seed territory, probably.
Yeah. Good for them.
I mean, you say that you don't want to go to the win out thing, but if they do win out, they're probably the number 1 seed.
Will they get past Maryland though?
So they would add 5 top 10 wins to what they currently have.
That's 8. But I mean, Maryland could get.
It depends on what Maryland does. Let's say it like that.
Yeah. All right. Who's next? North Carolina. I don't think North Carolina is going to lose out. If they did at 8-5, how uncomfortable are they?
If they lose out, I think it would actually be 8-6 probably because
I didn't mention the ACC semifinal. That'd be 8-6. Which again, I don't think that's. Let's say they wind up let's say they wind up with 9-10 wins.
If they win again, they're probably in. But if they do lose out, if they do go 8-6, they look like Michigan without a good win.
Mm.
Like, are we rewarding a team for losing all these games against big top 10 kind of teams?
Yeah, that's.
The thing is, though, they beat Michigan, so maybe we are.
Yeah. They're kind of like Cuse. It feels like their seed could really rise if they stack them up. I think they're probably. I just don't know how many of these I could see them going 2-1, which probably gets them 4 or 5 territory.
Yeah,
and
probably.
2-3.
I mean, obviously we play the games for a reason, but I think all of us would favor them over Duke right now.
Yeah, I would say so. So I think it feels like ±2 is kind of their seed. Maybe a little lower. Maybe ±3 is sort of their seed range. Anywhere from 3 to quarterfinal or first round against an 8 seed. I think feels like it.
I mean, I feel like if they beat Notre Dame, I'm like Notre Dame. They're in comfortably, and that Notre Dame maybe bubble out this year because
we're going to have a fun chat about Notre Dame, I think.
All right, so Notre Dame's got 3 games left. Let's just go run through it. Notre Dame wins one of these 3 games, and it's not North Carolina.
That's 6-5.
Okay. 6-5 with wins over Duke, Michigan, Virginia, and then they got the ACC tournament. Where are they? How are they feeling?
They have to win their ACC semifinal.
They have to.
So I feel like we've gone like so back and forth on Notre Dame this year that like 3 weeks ago, Safe was like, "Oh, they might finish 6-5," and then we were like, "Oh, they might be the best team in the country again." Now we're back to
they beat that Duke. They beat Duke. Everyone was like, "They're back. Here we go."
They beat Michigan. That game was over in 5 minutes.
Well, they annihilated Michigan. It was an execution. But
look, I think
Michigan beat Maryland. That's why. And then it was like, "Oh, wow, that looks even better now."
I think the truth on Notre Dame is somewhere between those 2 extremes.
I think that they are. I think they're. We talked about last year, and I really hesitate to say this because it's Notre Dame. I think that we talked on the pod on Saturday about like the difference between Final Four and championship ceiling. How there are teams that can make the Final Four and there are teams that can win the national championship. I don't know that I see Notre Dame as a team that can win the national championship. And I hesitate to say that because it's Notre Dame. They've won 2 in a row and they do have a bunch of talent still on that roster. I think it's a really good team. It just feels more to me like a team that can get to a Final Four and lose in the semifinal than it does a team that can win 4 games in the tournament. I mean, that's the thing. Is they have 5 wins right now. Then you're asking 4 wins in a row in the tournament. That's what I got watching them against Syracuse. Was Syracuse to me felt like a team that could win the entire thing. And Notre Dame to me looked like a team that I still think if you ask me, could Notre Dame make the Final Four? I'd say absolutely. But can they win 4 in a row? I'm not sure this year. And yeah, it can definitely change. Going to the Dome is hard. That was an incredible crowd. Biggest they've had in 10 years. So, but that's kind of my vibe on Notre Dame. Now again, I'm not going to rule out that they could win all. It's still Notre Dame.
I think that out of the games they have left, the North Carolina game is absolutely pivotal.
Yeah, if they win that, they're in. I mean, I guess they could finish 6-6, but yeah, at that point, yeah. I mean, if they finish, but I don't think. Let's say they'll beat Penn. Like they're going to beat Penn. So that's 6. They beat Penn. They're at worst they'd be 6-6. How many more of the Carolina Virginia ACC semifinal do they need?
See, I don't know if there's a real easy answer on that because Virginia is not for sure going to count.
Yeah.
Like North Carolina absolutely is going to count, probably as a top 10 win at the minimum.
So I think what we're coming to here is they need to win against North Carolina or the ACC semifinal.
Or if they beat Penn and Virginia, they're at 7-4, and like I mean 7-5 isn't like super comfortable, but they're probably going to get in. But yes, they either need UNC or the semifinal, and they're absolutely.
Well, here's the thing: if they beat Penn and Virginia, there's a chance that Duke and Michigan are their only wins.
Yes.
So
but how good is their RPI going to be though? Because it's probably still going to be pretty high.
Yeah, it'd be in the top 10.
It's uncomfortable.
Yes, I think to them they need to beat North Carolina or they need to win their ACC semifinal and don't lose to Penn, which I think they will to feel comfortable. If they beat North Carolina,
and hope Duke clings to a top 10.
Yeah, I mean, but if they beat North Carolina, they'd have a top. If they beat North Carolina, like their ACC semifinal will be North Carolina or Syracuse, probably.
Syracuse
I mean,
might be the number 1 seed, but.
So I mean, if they're playing,
it's probably going to be North Carolina twice, if I had to guess.
Yeah, like if they split games against North Carolina and they beat Penn, I think they're fine. It's if they don't have, even if Duke falls out, they'd have a top 10 win over North Carolina at worst, probably, and Duke and Michigan will be top 20s, and maybe Georgetown gets in if they keep winning. Maybe. I
think they gotta beat North Carolina to really feel good and win that first round game of the ACC tournament.
I don't think they need to. I think they need to be in once. I think if you beat Virginia, Penn, North Carolina, and you're 8-4, like they're getting in.
Not only are they getting in, they're probably getting a seed.
Yeah, like if they beat North Carolina, they need to beat North Carolina once. I don't think they need to beat them twice. If they beat them twice, we're talking.
If they lose this one, beat Duke in the first round of the semis, and then lose to ACC championship,
they wouldn't be playing Duke.
It's probably going to be Syracuse, Duke, Notre Dame, North Carolina if everything kind of goes like we expect.
Yeah, or North Carolina.
Then they're not.
Syracuse.
I mean, they're really sweating it. If they lose this weekend to North Carolina.
No, yeah, if they lose and they're 5-4 and
lose again or lose again to North Carolina, like they're not. I don't.
Yeah, that's my point. My point is that they need to win against they have 2 games left here that are. If they beat Virginia and Penn, they need to win one of those North Carolina ACC semifinal. They need to win. If they win one, they're good. But I don't think they need anything more than that.
Let me give an example. Let's pretend we have a college class. Let's say this class has 3 tests in it and they all count equally. If I make a 100 on the first test, I'm in good shape to pass the class. If I make a 10 on the first test, it's still mathematically possible I can, but there's a lot more pressure on me to get to that 70 average. This game with North Carolina decides what the rest of Notre Dame's season looks like. If they win it, there's no pressure. If they lose it, the pressure's ratcheted way up.
Yeah, because at that point, it's basically don't take any more losses.
Yeah.
Because losing to Virginia or Penn would be. I mean, if they lose to Virginia, Virginia will be in the top 20, but you're still at that point 5-5. And if you lose to Penn, don't do that. Which I don't. They're not going to, but like, don't do that. All right. We did Syracuse. We did Virginia. If Virginia went out,
I think Virginia. All right. So Virginia has Notre Dame, Duke, and Lafayette left. They have to beat Lafayette. So
yeah,
let's just go ahead and give them a win on that one. That's 6-6. I think they need 2 more wins on top of Lafayette to really have any kind of chance. That would put them at 8-7. I think they need 3, which is what they have left, which would be Duke Notre Dame ACC semifinal to absolutely be in. Like
Yeah, right.
That's
what I'm saying. Yeah,
8-7 Virginia is ugly, but the losses are all going to be top 20. The question is, how many wins do they have that count?
Yeah,
it would be an unpopular pick, isn't it? Large, most likely.
It would be. Yeah. All right.
If Virginia beats Notre Dame and Notre Dame loses to North Carolina, is Notre Dame not in the ACC tournament?
They're not.
So there you go. That's why I said Notre Dame needs to win, needs to beat Virginia.
Oh my God.
Now, again, how much do you realistically expect North Carolina, Virginia to win any of these games? I could see them. The problem for Virginia is the most realistic win you can see them winning is the game they never win.
But if they do win that game, they probably go to the ACC semifinals with at least some kind of chance of getting in at large.
Yeah, probably. Duke's got 3 games left, which is where it feels. If Duke makes the ACC semifinal, do they need to win that game?
It depends, because if the only win they got to get there was Virginia, what do they really have?
Yeah, they have maybe 5 top 20 wins. I mean, these wins are so. Is BU going to hang on?
That's what they did in 2022. It was just a hollow record. Nice. And they had even better because a lot of teams finished strong. But I mean, they had those bad losses, but they have a bad loss this year to Denver. That's
Yeah.
I guess they did have 2 bad losses. Yeah, there's 2 plus 20 losses that year. But the wins weren't that good. The ACC was kind of weak. Not kind of. They were weak that year. So the best wins, they had no great out of conference wins. The only kind of good wins were in conference that weren't that good.
I don't think it's 2022 as much as it feels like some of those years in 2016 or 17 where they finished 11-6 or so, or 10-7, and they had to go on the road in both of those years. They went to Royal and Hopkins. It feels like those years where they just, because the thing with 2022 was they lost 3. They had 3 bad losses. Here they're gonna have 1. It feels like those years where this is where you see kind of the issues with Duke's the way they kind of schedule. When it works great because they basically just don't lose any games. And then the ACC play usually takes care of itself, and they're looking fantastic. However, when you don't win all the games, you get in this difficult trap of, well, your non-conference schedule is okay, but it's not. Look, Duke doesn't play any Big Ten teams, and they play
Michigan.
2 Ivy. Yeah, they play Michigan. Yeah, they play 1 Big Ten team, and they play 2 Ivy League teams, and one of them's Penn, so they don't play Cornell. They play Princeton, and they play a bunch of games. So there's some calorie on there. This part, I think where you kind of see is that it can look very. Let's see how Quint always used to knock them, when they bring up records and stuff. He's like, well, they play 1 million games. It's when you play 1 million games and you win them, it's great. When you play 1 million games and you're 9-3, it's a little less. To me, Duke feels like they're going to be on the bubble either way. How it shakes out, we're going to have to find out.
I think Duke's like Michigan in the sense of that they have the opportunity to remove themselves from the bubble. I just don't think they're going to.
Yeah, I don't.
The Virginia game is absolutely pivotal. I think because if they don't win that, they're 9-6.
Yeah, could I see them beating Cuse or North Carolina? Yeah, I wouldn't. Again, the ACC can get weird just in a different sort of way. I mean, last year North Carolina beats Duke, or is up, and is up by like 8 goals, and then Duke realizes, oh crap, we probably should start playing now.
And if they win either of those games, then this conversation's over with. They're going to make it.
Yeah, that's why I say I think I don't think they're going to get a home game because I just don't see them winning multiple of these. I think they're going to go, if they make it, they're going to go on the road, but it feels like they are destined to be in the conversation.
Now, if the status quo does hold, the one thing they have going for them, and I mean like really going for them, is they beat Michigan, which is one of the other likely teams they're going to be compared to.
Yeah. They are off this weekend. They play Carolina. No, they play Carolina this weekend. Yeah. No, yeah, Duke, Carolina this weekend. Notre Dame plays Virginia.
So you want to quickly do Army and Richmond before we get out of here for real?
Yeah, Richmond, not happening.
All right. So on my bracket, my actual main sheet, I guess I'd call it, I had AQ or bust on teams like BU and St. Joe's, and then I had AQ or bust ? On Richmond. I would personally say they are, and I have said that since they lost to Duke. But I do see a way it could work for them. It's just extremely unlikely that everything falls the way they need it to, I think.
So it's basically Virginia winds up in the top 20. Georgetown winds up in the top 20. They beat St. Joe's, and they still wind up in the top 20.
Somehow UMass gets into the top 20.
Yeah, that feels... I don't know if that can happen.
In theory, they could end up with 5 top 20 wins and a pretty good RPI. It's probably possible, but it's like flopping a straight flush. The odds of it happening aren't good.
I just don't see that. For Richmond, I think they'll probably win the AQ, but for Richmond, your season was decided right, as far as at large, right here. Flip any one of those into the win column, and you Duke and Cornell, because they lost to Maryland by a bunch. Flip one of these two into the win column, and you are right in the conversation. I mean, my goodness, if they beat Cornell, those teams have the same. Not, I mean, Cornell will have the Princeton win, but those resumes are not super different. Had they beaten Cornell.
So to me, because you know that I think about teams in terms of their wins and loss profile and how it RPI stuff. I have been super confused about why people are so high on Richmond this year. Compare Hopkins wins to Richmond's wins real quick.
Yeah. I think people want it with Richmond, and I want it too, but you needed to win one of those games against Duke and Cornell. I mean, goodness, if they won both of those, they're in the NCAA tournament. If they beat Duke and Cornell, they just need to not screw up in the A-10 play. Don't lose to St. Joe's, basically. And they're in if they had beaten Duke and Cornell.
If they beat either one of them, they had a good chance.
Yeah, if they beat either one of them, they're on the bubble right now. If they beat both of them, they're in. Which I know that seems like, wow, that's hard. But it's man, you had they had it.
They had both of them.
Yeah, oh man.
So, Army. This. If we do this again in a couple weeks or 3 weeks, I see the potential that this is a much longer discussion. But for now, the discussion is just keep winning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Rutgers really, that helped them out a lot. And they need as many of these to hit as they can, because there's a world where this works out really well for them. There's also a world where, Navy 2 in there, 21, 22, 23, 20. There was one team, was it Duke 22, I think, I think it was, where Save talked about the wins that broke out. But a bunch of those wins were literally 18, 19, 20, 21. Like they beat Vermont.
The thing with Duke was like all these teams they played ended up winning their AQs, so their RPI went through the roof at the very end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Army there's a world where this works out great for Army. And Colgate, Navy, someone getting here. Yale keeps winning and they get in there. UMass feels much less likely, but maybe. And it's like, man, we're sitting beautifully. Maybe you win your
Navy, that may drag them into the top 20. You saw with Hopkins, they lost Ohio State. They went up 4 points in RPI.
So obviously the RPI is always changing with every result. But let's just say that everything holds steady. If you move Navy into the win column, they have wins over 21, 22, 23, and 24.
Yes. Like there's a world where it hits and they're in the NCAA tournament. There's also a world where it doesn't hit, and I'm not saying they're not in. I'm just saying that it looks a lot different.
It kind of like Harvard with that Syracuse, where that win over North Carolina may appreciate in value if Carolina does some more damage in the ACC.
So in a world
there's also a world where Carolina starts losing and it doesn't.
In a world where this really goes wrong, and I mean really goes wrong, say none of these marginal wins hit, North Carolina slips out of the top 5, BU becomes a bad loss, Army misses at 13-2.
Yeah, like it's on the table that they can. Both outcomes are on the table. What I will say is, what's really important to them is, one, I think, win as much as you can, and then two, pardon me, if they do take a loss, man, it better be the right one.
So my theory on that is that, first of all, they can't take a loss in the regular season. I think we all pretty much agree they can't survive.
That was last year. That was last year. They lost to Colgate, and that busted it. This year they won.
But my theory on when they take a second loss, because they have to by definition to be eligible for an AQ, that their best bet is for it to be BU and they put all their eggs in one basket. Because otherwise you're betting that both of these Patriot League teams end up in the top 20, and it's not super likely, I don't think.
Yeah.
Army is a discussion that will be much clearer if we do this again in a few weeks. For right now, it's very speculative, but I will say I'm concerned about 13-2 Army in a way I didn't think I would be.
Unfortunately, this is where the Patriot League failing to replace Loyola really just gets, because you need one. It's so hard to put all your eggs in the non-con basket. Like Richmond, even if Richmond had, let's say, wins one of these, like they still have St. Joe's probably sitting there. And Army needs somebody out of this Patriot League group to Colgate, BU. I mean, like let's say, if they beat BU again, maybe and lose to, but it's like if they beat BU again, does BU hang in the top 20?
That's why I think they need it to be BU again, because if they beat BU, do they knock BU out of the top 20?
Talking about a Sophie's choice. Jesus. Oh my Lord. That's the thing. It's so hard to put your eggs in the non-con basket entirely. You need your conference to give you something. And Army is working with their conference slate just almost, again, maybe it does. Maybe Colgate hits and maybe Navy hits, and then they're good. But it used to be where, Loyola was such a reliable team and honestly, like if you're looking at Army this year, a normal Loyola is probably in the top 20 in RPI, because by normal I even mean just like Loyola the last couple years, because with the non-con slate that Loyola plays, if Loyola is just like 6-6 or something like that, they're right in that. They might be where Colgate and Navy are, but Loyola is always hanging around the top 20, even the last couple of years when they were not very good. But they haven't replaced what Loyola was. They have, I guess Army kind of replaced them, but Army's always been pretty good. The Patriot League needs another really good team.
So I I stuck my Loyola hat on for a reason, and I want to tell you why I did it. Because when you said the Patriot League failing to replace Loyola, I thought at first you were advocating that the Patriot League should kick Loyola out and replace them with a better program. So
there you go. Safe. Loyola gets traded to the Big East for Georgetown.
This is the safe manifesto right here. I'd like the Loyola to escape to the Big East.
Yeah, I don't think the Big East. The Big East has got enough teams low in RPI.
So my parting thoughts for now, because it is still kind of early. There are 3 full weekends of lacrosse left before we go to conference tournaments. The RPI, I think, will take care of itself. That there are some things in there that kind of strike people as odd currently. Just give it time. I think we'll get there. I think we'll end up with an order that feels natural. Second, there are a bunch of teams that feel one win away from really being comfortable. Cornell, Syracuse, Ohio State, Penn State, North Carolina, etc. We'll have a much clearer picture in, say, a couple weeks. And we'll know really where these teams stand and what they need to do in conference tournament play. So it's early. Don't get too carried away with what either myself or other people project on seedings and bubble in, bubble out, that kind of stuff. We'll know a lot more in a few weeks.
Amen. Yeah, it feels like, things are still definitely in motion. Nothing's really settled. And nothing's really even slowed down yet, for the sort of settling down. So.
All right, you guys, thanks for having me on. And I know you've got some game previews to take care of. I'm going to pop out of the video and audio here and stick around and listen to that.
Mark, thanks so much, man.
Absolutely. Catch you guys again soon.
Thank you, Mark. All right. So, Safe, what is catching your eye as far as games this weekend?
Obviously, my game of the week is over in Columbus.
Sold out.
Glovegate, the Revenge of Glovegate, the Glove Strike Back. 2 of the top 5 teams in the country facing off each other. Just, Athens. I don't want to say Athens probably. It's not up there yet, but definitely just regional hegemon and a rising power coming to try to usurp them. But no, this is going to be great. This is one of the games that I love, just for personalities of the coaches, the teams, the antagonistic relationship that the 2 have. It's kind of like a little brother. Probably the Maryland fans are like, annoying little brothers trying to, go, get on the come up. But this year, Ohio State, kind of reminiscent a little bit of 2017 in terms of the run and the way the team is playing and just how things are playing out this year. I think it's going to be a really good one, man. Like last year's game was, tight contest, a one goal win by Maryland. It's going to be on the road now for the Terps. Like, it's not the most important game on the count on this week in terms of like bracketology and stuff. Like we said, there's potentially like make or break games for a couple teams, or really could help them greatly. Both teams are in pretty good positions in terms of overall. Maryland even more so, obviously, than Ohio State. But I think for the programs, this is for Ohio State. This may be the biggest game of on the count.
I think this game is, if we're talking if you want to just focus on who bracketology and things like that, and there's more consequential games. If you want to look at down the line to the NCAA tournament and how far can teams go, I think this game is probably the game that tells you the most. Because this feels, for Maryland, it feels like maybe a bit of an inflection point. Maryland's never lost 3 games in the Big Ten in the regular season. If they lose this one, and look, they're going to be fine, like Mark said, seeding wise, but is this kind of like last year with Maryland, where they hit a significant bump in the road before the tournament and they kind of need to build themselves back up? And if they lose this one, it feels like the type of kind of personnel, or not personnel, but changes in terms of lineup, how they attack things. I think changes start to come on the table for Maryland if they lose this game. all right, what do we need to, adjust for the NCAA tournament? Are we really a championship level team? If Maryland goes to Columbus and wins this game, it's like, listen, they've had a couple bumps in the road. Big Ten play is, we know what Big Ten play is. I think it'll be interesting. However many Big Ten teams get in, I think how they play in the tournament versus how Big Ten play went is going to be really fascinating. Because it's almost like sort of, Tillman always compares it to the AFC North. And it feels like those like AFC, especially more in the old days. It's different now. The Ravens got Lamar, the Bengals have Burrow, so it's different. But it feels kind of like those old school AFC North kind of games where you knew the game was going to be played a certain way, and it's going to be physical and it's going to be
Pittsburgh Baltimore game.
Yeah, exactly. What happens when Pittsburgh and Baltimore go play somebody else where it's a different style of game? And I think that's going to be really fascinating to watch with all these Big Ten teams is what happens when they get out of the Big Ten and all of a sudden the game is more open and the game is more fast. Every Big Ten team, these games like just pull each other into like a vortex of the same type of game. It just becomes a rock fight because they all want to play physical. None of them really want to push trends. None of them are by nature like super fast-paced teams. Like Rutgers is not the team it was a couple years ago. I know the commentators feel like obligated to say NASCAR like 5 times a broadcast. That's not Rutgers. Like Rutgers is a defense and goalie team. Michigan, who was last year the team that would want to play more up-tempo, is now a defense and goalie team. Hopkins tried to push more transition early in the year, but then like all their guys got hurt. And so they're going to struggle. We know what Maryland is. And Maryland and Penn State are maybe a little different, but there's still Maryland and Penn State are not. Maryland will run when they want to. But in terms of like the half-court offense, all these teams, I mean, I can maybe look it up, but all these teams' pace in the half-court offense is really slow. So these games, all these teams have great goalies. And so it just creates an environment that is significantly different to what it's going to be like when they get out of the league. And I think that's going to be fascinating is what does Ohio State look like when they play, if Ohio State plays in North Carolina, what does that game look like? Last year, Maryland felt like it actually benefited them to not be playing in the Big Ten. Like because Maryland also struggled to score and things like that. And Maryland felt like it didn't playing those Big Ten games over and over again actually didn't help them. Like in terms of their, like they felt more kind of better playing in a game where it could be a little more faster and their offense kind of could maybe have some opportunities and just more unsettled stuff. It is hard to create pace in the Big Ten. And that's why these games are so kind of what we're seeing. So, and this game feels like it's the most Big Ten game imaginable. I mean, this is going to be 2 guys in a phone booth punching each other in the face. If first to 10 probably, like, I think wins. Because you have 2 great defensive teams. You have 2 great goalies, maybe both All-Americans. Teams, again, I think Maryland would probably like to push transition if they can. Are they going to be able to? I don't know. You have 2 teams who are probably going to play fairly slower. Ohio State's offense. I mentioned Ohio State.
The difference.
For Ohio State's offense, this is the question: is that I mentioned they don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, they're gonna dodge and they're gonna find the open guy if the slide comes. The question is that there's no team in the country who's better at sliding and recovering than Maryland. So what Ohio State had success with last year, to a degree, again, that game was what, Maryland 8-7. So it's not as if Ohio State's offense had a bunch of success. But what they had success with was just dodging and beating Maryland at times. Like all 7 goals, I think they scored unassisted. This year, can they have the same success dodging against Maryland's stronger at the rope unit? Can they have the same success? How does Ohio State create offense if they're not drawing slides? Because if there's a team who's going to feel comfortable not sliding, or if they do slide, when Maryland slides, what you always should watch is watch where the help goes and watch how fast the help gets there. Because Maryland will slide, but the key is they are so much better at rotating than everybody else that by the time you think you get the pass to the guy who slid, they already have the help there. If you watched like the national championship last night basketball, the help defense for Houston and Florida was incredible. Like always, it's like two guys got to a guy. And even like by the time they try to spin the ball, find the next open guy, the problem is somebody's already getting there. And that's what Maryland does so well, is they slide, but they rotate to the help support as better than anyone. So I think that's the question for Ohio State is how do they do that? How are they able to, if need, create offense? For Maryland, teams have really taken away Maryland's midfield lately. And Ohio State's got a good rope unit themselves. That's, I think, probably going to be the focus. For Maryland, can their attack is putting up the numbers, but the thing is, can they put up, if their midfield is taken away, can someone on the attack put up big numbers? Like, can Braden Erksa have a hat trick? Can Eric Spanos have a hat trick? If it's Maryland's attack has like 4, 5, 6 goals, that might be a decent day. They need it to be their attack has 7, 8, or 9 goals, or they need their midfield to do what their midfield. When Maryland's at their best, their midfield is really humming. So that's kind of the feeling of it. Face-off play will probably be fairly even, I imagine. Maryland has more guys they can probably throw at them, which benefits it. I just think this game probably tells us a lot about if Ohio State wins this game. Look, they're a firm national championship contender. But if Maryland wins, I think it feels a little like Ohio State might win the league, but Maryland will still feel like the best team in it. And so I think that's why it's, for games in which you want to know kind of looking longer towards May and what teams, who can really win the national championship, I think this game is probably the most impactful in that regard this weekend. Do we talk about Syracuse Cornell, even though no one's going to see it? Because that's the other one. I mean, that's the other. Yeah, honestly, like Ohio State, Maryland, Syracuse, Cornell are the two.
Two huge games.
I mean, those are the top. Maryland's on the top 5, but they're 6. They're right outside there.
I feel really good about Syracuse after last week's game. Just the way they were able to respond, able to like keep Notre Dame at bay and just kind of like really take it to them, push them around. Like really like it now. The defense has been playing. Cusa Ordinera, like definitely a little bit of bumpy road like in the middle of the season, but I trust the Maryland game. But since then I feel like Syracuse has really offensively been able to produce. But I was really impressed with the way that they played defensively. I think that was the worst loss for Notre Dame since 2023, where they lost to UVA, I think by 5 goals, and I think they lost another regular season game that year by 5. So
2023 lost by 5. 2023.
I was like looking through it because that's when they turned it around and kind of went on their run. But
2023 they lost 2 games they lost to Virginia by 5 and 4. That was the only 2 teams to beat them that year, was Virginia.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that was the last time they lost by that many goals. And Syracuse, that was it. 2 games of that. Virginia by 5 and Virginia again by 6. So 2 games, but to one team. Since then, pretty much, either one goal losses or just victories for Notre Dame. That's why they're 2-time defending national champs. So I've said I just felt like Hughes really responded well. It's going to be a little bit interesting, as the neutral site game, and that has its own challenges for Syracuse, given their kind of sometimes not stellar play. Away from the dome, but I think I was like, Ryan said it was like the most cathartic win that he's the decade era. And I'm not saying like, it's going to just open the floodgates and Chiefs are just going to go win out the rest of the year. But, since, they lost to Harvard, for the most part, that defense has been pretty locked in. The UVA game was a close one, but, holding Notre Dame to 9 goals, the most prolific offense by Lacrosse reference stats. I thought it was a really, admirable job by their D. I think, doing what they did against Notre Dame, like, they won't be able to replicate everything against Cornell just because they have their own, unique offense. And, they're probably, exactly, noted it. You thought Cornell's the best offense in the country. So it's going to pose its own challenges for Syracuse. So, but yeah, I just really like how they're playing. I think they're going to have a good crowd, on the island, even if Brian's not there, but maybe some good amount of his cousins come out.
There'll be plenty of both
orange and red. There's going to be an orange red kind of day there, but I think they kind of feed on that. Weather-wise, it is what it is. So, hopefully, kind of holds off any rain or anything. That at least it's like a dry, cloudy day on Union Dale. But yeah, no, I'm super excited about this game. For second biggest game for me. They not actually catch it, on Court Sports Network, but I'll definitely following along and stuff.
Maybe we'll have to do a pool. Pool our money together. I think it's one of those old boxing pay-per-views. I think this game comes down to which team's rope units hang in better. Because Cuse does have the. So I think Cuse's close defense is better than Cornell's. The thing is, I think that Cornell's attack is harder to defend. Now, Cuse's attack is getting harder to defend with the lineup adjustments they've made. But I still like CJ Kirst is in. I'm just going to run through his. He's going to score 50 goals. He's going to get his 50th goal of the year on Saturday. It's April 12th. I mean, CJ Kirst is, if he keeps up he's averaging 4.9 goals per game. If Cornell's got 3 games left here in Ivy League, let's say they lose the Ivy League semifinal, let's say they're just their first round of the tournament. That is 25 goals. That'd be 74 goals by the first round of the NCAA tournament. Dude, he's going to set the all-time. He's going to become very quickly. I mean, the way he goes, it could be 2 games. He's going to become the all-time leading goal scorer in the history of Division I lacrosse, men's lacrosse, because he's at, I think, 14 away from Peyton Cormier. And here's the thing. Here's the crazy thing for him. He did it in, because I think we always people mention this nowadays with guys playing 5th years and everything like that. And like the extra does it kind of changes the nature of these records around. He is going to do it probably in like 60. I think he's at like 58 some career games now. I mean, he's going to do it. Oh, Cormier had played 73 games. Jesus, that's a lot of games. O'Keefe played 66. Kirst they played 19 games in 22, 15 games in 23, that's 34, 14 games in 24, that's 48, and they've played 50, so he's at 58 games. He's gonna set this in
less games in MAC.
Yeah, he's gonna do it less games in MAC. He's already passed Zach Greer, who had 206 and 67. I mean, he's going to do it in just an absurd pace. And this year, the way he's played, 6 goals against Lehigh, 6 goals against Denver, 6 goals against Hobart, 3 goals against Richmond, 2 against Penn State, 5 against Princeton, 9 against Yale, 2 against Penn, 6 against Albany, 4 against Brown. I don't know if he's at this level yet, but he's getting to, like, I was mentioned, there's so many great attackmen that we've seen in offensive players in recent years. But there was that almost like inevitable tier of like, it didn't matter who was guarding him. It didn't matter what you did. That guy was going to score. And to me, that tier is Jared Bernhardt, his senior year. It's Pat Spencer, his senior year. And it's Lyle Thompson. Those were three was like, it didn't matter, dude. Like, try whatever you want. Jared Bernhardt could run by anybody in his senior. Like, he just, see ya. Nobody's guarding him. Pat Spencer was like, there was just no, that dude, he could like post you up like he was a point, like a power forward in basketball. Then he could throw it over your head or do whatever. CJ Kirst is almost at that level, I think. And he's very close to, it does not matter what you do, he's gonna get his. And that just means, well, I think Syracuse has like Figueres and Dwan, like great close defenders. It's almost the point where it just doesn't matter. You know, like he's going to get his. And then they've got Michael Long behind him, who's played a million games, and Ryan Goldstein was great, and they got their midfield. So I think Cornell's going to get theirs offensively, because I think Cuse is, you're not slowing that guy and that offense down. At least the attack. On the flip side, Cornell's defense, I think that they're close defense again. I don't know if it's as good as Cuse's, but I think Cuse might be a little easier to defend. Just in comparison. So I think both offense are going to score goals here. Both teams have good face-off guys. Both teams' goalies are playing pretty well, I think, at a similar level. The question to me becomes the rope units. Cuse is not super deep there, and they weren't really tested by Notre Dame. They held up great against Notre Dame. They weren't really tested as much, though. They won face-offs, which helped them keep the guys fresh. On Cornell's end, they did get Chris Davis back, who's one of their best short stick defenders. So Cornell's in a little better shape than they were there, but that's kind of been a weakness to me throughout the year defensively. I think whichever team holds up in that area, where you kind of got, if you're Syracuse, you got to accept, all right, CJ Kirk's going to score 4 or 5 goals. If you're Cornell, you maybe accept Owen Hiltz might get 3 or 4, or Leo might get his. It's how can you limit everybody else? You can't let somebody down that lineup pop off for 3 or 4 goals. If that happens, you're probably going to lose. And so that's the question, I think, between these teams. These teams look very evenly matched to me. I don't really know. I think it's going to come down to 1 or 2 plays here or there. And also, it feels less likely because, who knows with rain and things like that, but you also know the way these two teams can play. This game could just be a freaking nuts. And it's like, I don't, something's going to happen we don't foresee that,
coaches get kicked out.
Like, I don't know. So, but yeah, I hope the weather kind of stays clear and it's as good as we hope for.
Touch on the other games. I'm kind of interested during our bracketology talk. I don't know if want to go.
Let's pick these games. Who you got, Safe?
All right. So first game on the docket is North Carolina at Duke. Jake, I'm sticking with the Tar Heels. I'm riding or dying with Coach V and Coach Petra. I really love that dynamic duo that they have. I just think Duke just doesn't have the juice. They had your fire, and I think it's going to catch up to them this week against our.
I'm making an executive decision. I'm taking Penn State Hopkins off the board.
Gotcha.
I need to see Hopkins win a game before I can. If Hopkins wins this, we can add him back on for the Maryland game. But
I think it's a fair decision.
Yeah, let's do Army Navy.
Oh, okay.
Let's add Army Navy in there.
Is that Army?
It is. This one's in Annapolis, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this one's in Annapolis.
Next on the docket, the Michigan Wolverines come to Jersey to take on Rutgers. I just think Rutgers is a little bit hot right now. Going to stick with them. Big win last week against Maryland. Really kind of reminiscent of those days where they just defended SHI so well. Really happy for Rutgers, man. Like just as good as those teams that they had under Breck, when they were really humming, tournament Final Four trips, like those were really good teams. But those were elite Maryland, 2021, 2022 teams were historic teams, especially the 2022 team. So it's just like as good as Rutgers was that year, like you said, they beat everyone but Maryland. It's just an APM for those 2 seasons. But you can just really see how happy and not emotional, so too strong, but just the jubilation of actually beating this historic team finally, first time since 1980. That just you can see with even for the alums, how many times that they play Maryland tough, and I think I saw at least 2 games at Rutgers Stadium against the Terps. It's always good games, always entertaining, but for them finally to pull it off last week, I think and I just think they're just gonna maybe keep it rolling. Maybe like you remember, Jake, I was saying like who's going to be 2022 Brown? Maybe it's Rutgers. Sticking with the Scarlet Knights, and on this one, I'm going to go argue.
What do you got for the next 3? Army, Navy, Maryland, Ohio State, Syracuse, Cornell.
I got Army for Army, Navy. I like your pick of Navy because I have seen the team that's the underdog going in is 10-1. But I think Army's remembers last year. Doesn't want to have another Patriot League slip up. Arch rival. Sometimes have different plans than the ones you have going in. So I could definitely understand the people picking a midshipman. But I'm just feeling about this about the Army. Cuse Cornell. I'm going to say the other one for last. Cuse Cornell. I'm sticking with the Orange, man. Like I said, it's similar thing that kind of Rutgers, really big win last week, emotional win, first win against a team that's been on their back, not as long as Maryland's has been on Rutgers' back, but Notre Dame's had Syracuse's number, and they really took it to them. And I think the good times are rolling. It is in a neutral, away from the Dome game, but I don't think that's going to hinder Syracuse, and I think the Orange take it. And boy, the game of the week, the Maryland Terrapins visit the Ohio State University. Jake, wait for this game all season. I'm going with Ohio State, man. I love Tills, that. I just think that they played him tough 2 years in I can't exactly remember the 2022 games, but I don't think they went that well.
Ohio State got a big lead in that game.
2022.
Yeah, and then Maryland scored 8 goals in a row, and
they
won.
Right, yeah.
It was one of those where people were mentioning, that's always well, look what Ohio State did with Maryland. It's well, Maryland still won by 6.
And 2023 close game. I was remember called game. And last year, a 1-goal game. So the years where the Buckeyes weren't, kind of doing that well, they still seem to play Maryland strong. And I think this year, maybe being at home, whether they're playing Marinier, I'm going to say that right. I apologize. I think
Marinier.
So I'm trying to put, I guess, first one syllable for Marin. So I thought it was the announcer was Marinier, Marinier. But Marinier. Okay.
Yeah. Say more like yay.
Okay. But I think he may be a difference maker. This one just a lights out shooter. But Ohio State has other shooters besides him, and I think as good as Maryland's D is, I just think Ohio State, the emotional push of being at home, the way that they've been playing, being able to close out games, being able to that win against Notre Dame, I think was a big step for them. I think they keep it moving, and I think Ohio State takes us.
All right, I am going to go with
Marinier.
There you go. Marinier, yeah, Alex Marinier. Great player, having a tremendous season.
Loving the stat line, right? Was it 42-2 or something like that?
Yeah. I'm going to say North Carolina versus Duke. I'm going to take the Tar Heels. I could, this is always it's a game that kind of feels like it usually draws itself to being close, especially when the teams are good. Sometimes when they're not, it can get. But these teams have definitely played some classics in the past. I think I remember some like 15-14 Friday night games. And so I do expect that this game will, kind of, I think it'll be close. And I think you could definitely expect Koskinen. This is usually the game that they really turn out for, is the Carolina game. So I expect there'll be a good crowd there, especially if the weather's good. I don't know that with Duke's path to victory. It's usually when these games they've won, it's been kind of late game offense, some like big clutch kind of goals late in games, or it's been their defense playing really well. And I like their defense. I think the strength of their defense is their shorties. I don't know so much that it's their poles. And Carolina is not if you defending Carolina, you want the strength of your team to be your close defense, so that you can take away Duffy and Petra. And if you can't really do that, it doesn't really matter if you're taking away their midfield, because those guys are just going to pop off for a big number. And so I just don't know if Carolina can do that or Duke can do that. And then also late game, late game offense. Ben McCarthy as a freshman kind of has a solid, performance of the faceoff dot. They got a couple other guys who can rotate in there. I just think it's tough to win faceoffs late against Wambach. I don't know that they'll have the possessions a bunch. What I will watch for is goalie play. Jameson's been up and down a lot as a sophomore, but he can have great games. He can lock in and play really well. Michael Gianfrancaro, I think, is a potential weakness long-term for Carolina. Quint kind of talked, like they've talked about this in the Virginia game. His mechanics they don't look great. When he's giving up goals, it doesn't look great. I don't feel great about him. And I remember that game, like Princeton played against Maryland last year. I mean, he really struggled in that first round game. Right now, he's at this year his save percentage. He is at, let me pull it up. He's at 54. In their some of their big games, like against Hopkins, he saved 37%. Against Princeton, he saved 48%, saved 50% against Penn, saved 38% against Army, 50% against Virginia. The games where he's been above 50% are Michigan, Stony Brook, Hofstra, Jacksonville, and High Point. That's I don't know. I think I could see that it could be Duke's path for me is if Jameson can lock in, have a great game, and maybe they can shoot the ball well, that could be the path. So that is one where I'm looking. I don't know. I don't love Jeff Carr right now for Carolina. Michigan or Rutgers. I'm going to go Rutgers. I kind of pondered this one. I think at Rutgers there matters, and I think face-off play could be Rutgers could kind of swing it with Paletto. And honestly, this might just be the route I start going with these Big Ten games. I'm just going to pick the team that has the better goalie. And Hunter Taylor's really good, but Cardin Stoller's fantastic. So that might just be what I do. Army Navy, I'm going to go Navy. Now, Army Navy is one of those rivalries where like it's the reverse, it's the flip. Usually the road team plays better. So that being in Annapolis maybe doesn't, like Army won the last one in Annapolis. Army can't beat Navy at Mikey, but they can't beat them in Annapolis. But also an underdog usually plays well in this. It's an underdog's rivalry. So I'll go Navy. Also, the big for Navy, playing a team that also doesn't have their face-off guy. Maybe that Navy's face-offs just kind of killed them. So Maryland, Ohio State. I'm going to go Maryland. I think that Maryland losing 2 in a row, it used to be a thing that never happened. It has happened a bit more recently, but I don't know. I still just think we saw Maryland after the loss to Michigan, the way they came back against Penn State. Maryland after a loss is usually a pretty reliable bet. They refocus and really lock in. I think that's going to happen here. I just think everything Ohio State does, I think Maryland does a little bit better. I think Maryland's defense is a little bit better. I think McNaney's a little bit better than Fyock. I think their offense is a little bit better. So can Ohio State drag Maryland into kind of the mud the way Rutgers and Michigan did? I think it's definitely possible. I just think in that one, I could see Maryland's defense. Again, the Rutgers game, look, I mean, Maryland's offense held Rutgers to what, 8 goals? And a couple of those were like late, like last 2 minutes. I don't see Maryland what they shot against. I mean, they shot like, I think what did Maryland score? 5 goals on like 40 shots. They shot like 13%. I don't know. I don't see that happening again. So I'm gonna go with the Terps. And Syracuse Cornell. I'll take Cornell. Outdoors, that plays a part. In the rain, feels more Ithaca to me. I don't know. This one feels like a throw a dart.
Love it. Could be separation weekend. Because Pick'em is close for everybody. Adam Fry tied in the lead, I believe. But yeah.
Yeah.
You're 2 and 20. You are we're tied at second place at 28-24. So
that Dartmouth pick last week.
that hurt.
Oh man, listen. It's you know what?
I was going to try to claim Syracuse, but I forgot Adam picked Syracuse because I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go for Syracuse. I was going to be like, oh, can we count that as a win? Because I was like, oh, I should have. I'll pick Syracuse if nobody else does on the pod, but Adam ended up picking it, so I didn't have anything to say.
The Dartmouth thing, we dare to dream. We're dreamers, Save.
We're dreamers at heart. Absolutely.
Be a dreamer.
The cynicism on this pod is straight through.
Just like, I'm just going to pick the favorite. You know what? No, we dared to dream.
That was a heat check. That was a heat check.
Pull it up from way out. Oh, man. All right. We'll see what the power hour this weekend, because I know Safe's got the marathon, and then Ryan's in DC. Maybe I'll just get Ryan to like call in. I'll just be like Ryan, just doing like a radio.
What's he doing? What's he at?
Ryan, I'll just have Ryan like call in from the National Mall, and just Ryan I'll be like, Ryan, just go start interviewing people.
Go to the Irish Embassy in DC.
I'll never forget when you the Princeton Cornell game last year. When you were just like, I think I'm just gonna go live and start interviewing people.
It was like
you should have done that. We should have gone live. Like, Safe, start interviewing Princeton fans, asking them.
It's just absolutely crestfallen. As if somebody's like
they were more crestfallen than they were this past weekend. After all, they looked at their 401k.
I was gonna say exactly. No, it was like somebody told them that the trust was their grandfather took them out of the will or something.
Oh man! All right, let's get on out of here. So power
shout out to
hour.
Mark. Appreciate him coming on. See you guys soon out there.
We will get him back in the next couple weeks or so. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, Cross Commission on YouTube. We'll put this up. Keep smashing that like button. Becky Lynch for president. Stay hydrated.